Hello. Thank you for being here. If you are new, my name is Zara Hoffman. I'm the founder of Inimitable Books, which is publishing multiple books this year in my mission to uplift marginalized voices without pigeonholing authors into writing about their trauma. Tonight, we're here to celebrate a cover reveal for Until the Last Page by Chantal Gadoury, and I'm going to let our first inimitable author of our first title, The Legionnaire, which is out now and you can purchase along with our other titles at the link above my head. She's going to be taking over and interviewing the author. So, Sam, you're here and I'm going to go.
Hi, everyone. Like Sarah said, I'm Samantha Trumfeld, author of The Legionnaire, available now, and unofficial inimitable interviewer. I am so excited to be here again for another lovely cover reveal and to celebrate our newest inimitable author, Chantal. Chantal Gadoury is a best-selling fairy tale, retelling, and romance author living in the beautiful countryside in Pennsylvania with her mom and her family Yorkie, Taryn. When Chantal isn't pursuing her next writing endeavor, she enjoys spending time with her loved ones and taking long walks to the sound of BTS. She's a TikTok enthusiast, loves all things Disney, and loves a good romantic K-drama. Chantal first started writing stories at the age of 7 and continues that love of writing today. After graduating with a degree in creative writing, writing novels has become a dream come true, which is great for a fairy tale author to have her dream come true. We're going to invite Chantal up. A warm welcome to the inimitable stage. Hi.
Hey.
Oh,
It's wonderful to be here. So thank you so much for having me today.
I'm so glad that we get to be here to celebrate this. To have another lovely cover reveal and another author. We're very happy anytime we get a new person to share with us. Why don't you go ahead and if there's anything else you want to say for your intro? Anything you want to let the crowd know about yourself?
Yeah, well, just as you mentioned, my name is Chantal, and I have written several titles. This is actually my 10th title, so I'm super excited about this book, even more so because it's so personal to me. As my intro alludes to, me being a fan of Disney and fairy tales, I've grown up with the love of it, and I've never lost it, even at the ripe old age that I am currently. And this story was such a great way of being able to take all the things that I loved as a child and all the things I loved as a 20-year-old and now a 30-year-old and bring them into my character, Jo, which is also one of my favorite movies as Little Women. And that's where Jo came from.
I love that. I love Jo. I think, like, if you're a writer and you get with Jo on some level, like, are you sure that you want to keep doing that? Like, no hate.
Exactly.
Like, she is the writer.
Yes.
Why don't we pull your cover up and talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah.
Here is the lovely cover that Keelan designed. There are, like, so many small details on this cover. Can you talk about a few of them?
Well, I would say that one of my favorite elements to this is definitely the clock. I know that it might be not the first choice for people, but time is such a concept in this story. And time is also non-existent in this story, which is why it's such an interesting story when it comes to being a portal romance. And I love the fact that on that little tiny book next to there's all these little detailings next to it. And it is a touch on the fact of the book that Josephine actually finds, and which begins her adventure.
What was the inspiration for this cover then? Like, obviously, you picked a lot of the things that are in the story, but did you know that's what you wanted to do when you went into the process?
No, actually, when we were looking at all the different drafts, while there were like little elements and it was really cool to see them, I didn't even think about a lot of the really small details until we started to, flesh out the cover and to talk about all the different parts of it. I knew that having a frog was really important because, I mean, you have to have a frog prince if you're writing about a frog prince. But I think a lot of come together, like as we had further conversations.
Okay, so did you have an image in your head for the cover going into it? Like, you're one of the only one of us Inimitable authors that's had other books done. So, like, you've had experience with cover design. Did you kind of know what you wanted? Or was this like going and just doing whatever?
Yes, when I was in the process of writing this book, one of the things that I do to continue to motivate myself is to make like fake mock covers and to be like, okay, if you get this done, your book cover could look like this. And while there are some similarities, like the beautiful swirls of the fonts and stuff, and the frog, and actually the apple and the glass slipper, which is kind of funny that those ended up without me ever saying anything to anyone. Um, yeah, I had an idea of what I was envisioning. And while it's not exactly the same, it's actually better than I imagined it. So, and I will say that the process of this cover is so much different than any sort of experience that I've had in the past, where it was more of, I was just more provided a cover and I didn't have much of a say, which I think is it could be typical, just depending on the company that you're working with and their processes and what they're able to do. And I think I was extremely lucky to be a part of it from the beginning to what you're seeing now.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's something that we do right here at Inimitable, personally. So let's talk about the book. Let me read for anyone who hasn't heard or hasn't seen anything about Until the Last Page yet. Discover what happens when a young woman unexpectedly finds herself inside a book of fairy tales where she is charged with breaking a frog prince's curse and searching for a way home. Every good fairy tale begins with once upon a time, or they're supposed to at least. But for 25-year-old Josephine Hart, her once upon a time began with her literally crash landing inside a book of fairy tales and nearly crushing a frog, who is actually a prince. An annoying, snarky frog prince named Anurin, seeking the kiss of true love to break his curse. He vows that if Joe agrees to help him find his princess, he will get her home. With every turn of the page, their adventure leads them deeper into fairy tales familiar to Joe. Through their journey, they discover that despite their initial clashing, they're both exactly what each other needs. It is only when they encounter a devious man with a talent for spinning straw into gold that they realize just how quickly their plot can take an unexpected twist. Really quick, before we jump into like the serious questions,
Yeah.
I love that. I just love that synopsis. I think it sets things up so well. And when you were deciding like fairy tales, how did you kind of decide which ones you wanted to do and like where your individuality, your storytelling was going to come through in those fairy tales?
Well, I knew that when Josephine was jumping into the fairy tale book, I had to be very specific that it is a Grimm Brothers fairy tale book. So I had to look at a Grimm Brothers fairy tale book and figure out which stories were in them, which stories I knew, which ones I was more familiar with, and then which ones I felt that I could perhaps like deviate or explore a little bit more or make them my own. Um, I was trying to find similarities between the few of them, and while there aren't, it was more of then it became how they get from one place to another that would help sort of build the bridge, which there's also a twist in how they get from story to story. But I think I had more fun if I knew the story well and I felt that I could have the freedom to sort of change the story or adapt it to be the way that I wanted it to be.
So did you decide like beforehand? Did you know what stories they were going to, or was it kind of like what fit the plot in the moment?
I knew a rough idea of the stories that I was going to explore. Not all of them ended up in this book, but a good majority of them did. And I'll say that, like towards the end of the story, yeah, there was one that was thrown in, and I was like, oh yeah, this one makes sense. So I didn't always know from the very beginning, but I had a good rough idea of which stories that I was choosing and how they were going to connect, or what was going to happen and what was the purpose. It couldn't just be this random story that they were going into. There had to be something that either was going to help develop their relationship, like her and the frog, or if it was going to help further the story for how he was going to find his kiss of true love, or her sort of dealing with her own sort of baggage that she's bringing into the story, and
Her life
tackling this. Sorry.
Her life beforehand was crazy.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And yeah, so and tackling the idea of what's real, because we as readers, we feel like these characters are real when we're reading our books, and Josephine sort of tackles this idea of these aren't real people, but they are real. So what is real and what isn't?
Okay, so let's take that and jump into your character creation, because you're obviously like pulling from a lot of existing characters, but also, you know, changing it a bit. So what did the character creation process look for you for this book?
Well, I actually came prepared. So I wanted to share my little secret that I do for my books. So if anyone's a fan of Harriet the Spy, I learned this trick from from a Nickelodeon movie when I was little. She used to write everything in a composition notebook, and I do too. And any sort of idea that I get, any sort of character or person that I want to explore and flesh out, I put it in my notebook, and I even print out like pictures from Pinterest. So that's how like my character creation begins, is one, looking at Pinterest and going through all these pictures and what speaks to me. Josephine was kind of really easy because at the end of the day, like the secret is Josephine is me. Her past history is mine, and her tackling her issues with love is very much was mine when I was writing this book. Arian, wow, he is a he was a snap. He was a snapper of a dude. Um, I had real issues when I was trying to create him. He just wasn't this dashing man at all. He was just like insulting her left and right. And I'm like, how am I going to get these two characters to even come together in the end? And I was getting a little worried after like story number 2. But the rest of everything sort of fell together. It just came together in the end. I had familiarity with the Hansel and Gretel story because one of my other previous publications that I co-wrote with the author A.M. Davis, we wrote a Hansel and Gretel retelling, very dark. It's actually like way different from this story completely. And I know she'd be laughing at me right now because it's so different. But I really loved the Hansel and Gretel story, and I put it in my book as a nod to our time of writing. I wanted to sort of incorporate her into my story too because I love A.M. Davis so much. So it was kind of easy to go back into that world, and it was a nice beginning for Joe and Arian.
So we're gonna just deviate a tiny bit. I want to follow up on you put so much of yourself into this book. I didn't realize. How did that feel, writing it and now getting ready to publish it?
You know, it was very therapeutic to write things down in the way that I did. It felt a little more of I could distance myself. And obviously I didn't put everything into this story, but it was just enough to kind of read it back to myself and say, yeah, that was a big problem. And now we're going to explore how we can heal ourselves. Both me and Joe went on this journey together with this little frog. And at the end, I think that he very much healed at least a little portion of some of the hurt that had been done. But it was nice to fall back in love with love again in this fairy tale realm in the way that I have always loved this romantic fairy tale love. It was nice to find it again. And it came in just in time too for me personally, so it was great.
Like as readers and writers, sometimes the right story just finds you in that exact right time when you needed it the most. And that's just such a beautiful feeling. So I'm glad that this story found you when you needed it.
Yeah. Now I am nervous. I am a little nervous for people to read it, but also like it is what it is, and maybe it'll help someone else. And that's all I can ask for.
So back to your characters. Do you have a
Yeah.
favorite side character? I'm a side character person myself. Like I love side characters. So
I do. I really fell in love with my 7 men from Snow White, and I won't spoil too much, but there are 2 characters that really just stuck with me, and they're actually still with me. I can't get them out of my head. I think about them all the time. I definitely want to revisit them in some capacity someday. But yes, those 7 men, they are like my favorite part of this story. I love them so much.
I look forward to hitting that part in the story then. So let's talk about character names. We already kind of touched on, Joe coming from Little Women, but let's talk about some of your other characters.
Well, so Ariane came from an actor, and his name is Ariane Barnard. There was a time in my life when I was watching The White Queen over and over and over again. And it's a historical drama about the Plantagenet family, the royal British family that came before the Tudors. And Richard III is played by Arian, and he is my face character for this character. I fell in love with him as a character, and wanted to borrow his name, so I did.
Lovely. It's a perfect fantasy name. It's a perfect fantasy name. Like, you couldn't get better than that. So let's jump into your world building.
Okay.
What was it like? You kind of touched on this a little bit with Joe trying to figure out like what's real and what's not real. But what was it like balancing Joe's knowledge of our world with her new setting? Like, she doesn't have a cell phone. She doesn't have electricity. She doesn't have clothes, like more clothes. How is it like balancing that stuff?
It was hard to keep track of like at least the clothes part, especially with all the shenanigans that she and Arian end up getting into. So I did have to, think about like, okay, maybe at this point in the story, someone can supply her clothes. Someone will help her out to maybe look more like them. The cell phone, I don't know. I think there was a time at the very beginning where I was like, yeah, she really can't call home. She can't really like look up on a calculator how to, let's calculate something, or let's text someone for help, or Google Map something. But it wouldn't have helped her anyway. So that was a little easier to sort of not have to worry about. I always end up mixing up like the smaller details when it comes to world building, like eye color and hair color. I get it mixed up all the time. I have to give myself a little note in my notebook, writing down who has what. But I guess after a while, it's sort of, you figure it out. You just kind of figure out when Joe's going to get new clothes, and how is Ariane going to fit in her pocket, and where's the pocket, and all that stuff.
So how did like Joe's experience of falling into the storybook kind of change how you went about the world building? Because obviously, like you're going into Hansel and Gretel and the sweets house and that kind of stuff. So what were you thinking? Was the world building part of why you picked some of the stories, or what went into that?
Yeah, I think I wanted to have fun with it. So some of the stories I ended up picking, like Hansel and Gretel, not only was it, a nod to my friend, but it was also, I just wanted to figure out, how would you actually build a real life gingerbread house? How would that actually stand? And I actually remember asking, I was vacationing at my grandparents' house in Myrtle Beach, and I turned and said, how would a gingerbread house stand? Like, what would you do to use to like hold it up? And I think they all stared at me like I was crazy. And in that moment, I definitely was. But I guess I chose the stories that I knew that I wanted to have fun with, and move things around. Like, I guess I'll spoil just a little bit. It's not a huge detail, but with Snow White, instead of the men having a cottage that you typically envision from Disney, they actually have this magnificent tree house that they all live in, and it was so fun to sort of like rebuild this world that's still fantastical and fairy tale like, but it's different. So it's almost like you're getting a fresh new take of a fairy tale that you've grown up with.
I like that it's kind of like Jo's going into it and she kind of knows what's happening, but then it's like, wait, that's not how it went when I read it. And then she has to figure out like how to.
Yeah. I kept thinking about Back to the Future, Marty McFly. He can't ruin the space-time continuum, right? If whatever he knows, he's not allowed to change. And I kept tackling that idea of, if Jo knows something, is she allowed to tell Ariane? Is she allowed to tell the people around her? And if she is, does that mean that she's changing the story? And if she's changing the story, is it changing for everyone or just her in that moment? Would it be like you would pop out of the fairy tale book and everything would be rewritten? So I think Jo also sort of deals with that question herself of, what am I allowed to say? Am I changing things? Is this breaking some space-time fairy tale continuum rule? And I also had to ask myself that a lot of what am I willing for her to say out loud versus what are we and her, like us as the readers and her, we know what the story is, or maybe some of us aren't really educated on our fairy tales. We don't remember. It's been a long time. Not everyone is as obsessed with fairy tales as I am. So, I mean, I am the person that if you have like a Disney trivia night, I'm the person to call, but not everyone's like that.
You're the phone a friend.
Yeah. Yes. Phone a friend. Me. I'm the friend you phone. But so I was trying to really tackle that of, I don't want it to be something that no one could enjoy. But if you do know your fairy tales, then you can kind of follow along or get a new twist.
Very nice. I know you've talked about it kind of like in relation to Once Upon a Time as well, and it always makes me think of Emma accidentally getting sucked back in time, and like she wants things to happen the way they happen, but also her presence just automatically messes things up. So like I think it's kind of like that in my head at least. What was the spark for the story? So now we've talked about you having some things in your real life that went into the book. Was that the spark, or was there something else and then you realized you could also go through this in the book?
Yeah, so I had watched a K-drama called W Two Worlds, which is about a girl who her father creates comic books, and she actually gets pulled into this comic book and has to help the main character, and she's not necessarily trying to get out of it, but as each episode ends, she has to almost like shock the main character in order for her to get pulled out of her dad's comic book. But then she wants back in. So she like jumps in and out of real life in a comic book. And I remember when I watched that, I was like, how cool would it be if someone got sucked into a book of fairy tales? That's like genius. And then I decided that I wanted to be the person who wrote that story. And then I started to just think about all the things that I loved growing up with. Like Shelley Duvall's The Fairy Tale Theater was a huge inspiration to me. I grew up with those. I wanted that vibe. I wanted that, the labyrinth, the Fairy Tale Theater, Princess Bride, the Never Ending Story, like all those really old 90s things that are familiar, at least for me. I wanted that to be the vibe of Until the Last Page. So that's what sparked it.
I love that. What was your favorite part drafting this book? Are you someone who prefers drafting or someone who prefers editing?
Oh, I would much rather draft than edit.
So what was your favorite part drafting?
Probably just trying to figure out where the story was going, because I don't always like outline everything. I'm more of a pantser, to be honest with you, than an actual like outliner. But there were times where I had to do that because Jo and Ariane were just fighting so much in my head that the story wasn't going anywhere. And I would just have pages of them just like, and I'm like, this is not a romance. This is just frenemies to frenemies. Like there's nothing going on here. But I guess my favorite part was it was really the Snow White world. Like when you enter I never wanted to leave Snow White. I was so sad to leave Snow White. And if I could go back, I would go back to Snow White in a heartbeat.
So what did editing look like then? You know, you didn't exactly have an outline. Did that make your edits harder? Did you kind of like know where you were going once you finished the draft? You knew what you wanted to fix?
Yeah, I think at times, like when I would finish a chapter and I wanted to go back and do some editing, I would. But I mostly will just write a book and get through it and then go back and edit if I have like huge edits. Of course, I'm always going back and changing sentences, or I think there was towards the end of the story, and I won't give away a lot of that, but there was a part where I was like, I just don't know how I'm going to get this to point A to point B, and I had to do some editing to finagle it. But I guess long story short, I just wait to do the editing because I hate editing. I hate it. It's like going to the dentist. I hate it.
Compared to like your other books, since this is your 10th publication, did you feel like the drafting and process editing were easier or harder?
It was much easier. I think it was much easier because I just love the story so much. Yeah. There's more, there's so much more in this story for me than any of my other books that I've written before.
Okay. Last craft question. When you were editing, what was the hardest thing for you to cut from until the last page?
Hardest thing to cut. Well, my mom would say it's all the darting of glances that I had in my writing. It's just more of like a line editing thing, but I had way too many of them. And she was one of my editors from early on. What was hard to cut? I guess a story. Like I didn't end up actually putting one of the fairy tale stories, a destination, and I'm hoping that maybe it'll appear someday again in some other story or draft or whatever. But I think that was the hardest thing for me to cut, and I just knew there was no point. There was no reason for them to travel to the story other than my own pleasure. Yeah.
It's hard when you really love something and you're like, this is great, but it doesn't do anything for the book and I have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Worst. Awful. All right. Let's dive deeper into until the last page. We've obviously gone into some of this already, but is there a lesson? And do you think there's something that people will learn, like you wanted them to learn? Like I think people learn in every book they read, no matter what. But did you have anything specifically in mind that you want people to learn or feel when they finished reading your book?
I would say I would hope that when people are reading this story that they fall in love with love again in the way that I needed to fall in love with love again. And I know that it can seem a little dangerous to say because you don't want to just fall in love with this concept of love. If you're loving someone, you love them for them. But I think it's like opening yourself back up for love again and believing in all the good things that it can provide. And I think it was also this concept of realness that I hope that people can walk away with is even if something's just on paper, it can be real to you, and that's okay. Like if you fall in love with a character, if you fall in love with your own character that you've written, I think that's okay. I think there's so many things that we can be very judgmental about, and I think there just needs to be more kindness and openness. And I hope that perhaps that makes people think when they're reading this book.
Yeah, we live in a very cynical world. So I think if people could pick up the fall in love with love, just fall in love with being a good person and kind. And I think that would be a great lesson for so many people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have like any themes in your book? Like it kind of goes with the other last question. So if you didn't have anything specifically, that's fine. But like, was there anything thematic wise that kind of carried through the book aside from the fairy tale aspect?
I think it was more of just the fairy tales where there was a theme of them trying to figure out how to get from one place to another, Joe is always trying to make sure that the story is going the way that it's supposed to go. And she's also just trying to forgive herself and to get home. Like there's no like real concrete theme, I think, at least. If someone finds something, that's great. That's awesome. I would love to hear it. But I didn't intentionally put any sort of theme into the story.
If you fell into a fairy tale like Joe did, which one would you want to be a part of?
Well, if it's one from this story, I would love to fall into the Cinderella story or the Snow White one. If I could go live in the treehouse with all those seven men that I created and just get to talk to them, it's if you have ever seen Tuck Everlasting, the Disney Tuck Everlasting movie, and the way that the Tucks live in the woods and it's that warmth and that freeness, that is the Snow White story. So if I could go live there and be with it to enter that world, I would absolutely do it. I would just stay away from the evil queen. I'd be like, apples, no thanks.
No, I don't need apples. Thanks. I'm allergic.
An apple a day, I'll go see the doctor. It's okay.
So let's take a break with the interviews and hear a little bit from Until the Last Page.
Okay. Well, I'm going to actually read a little bit of chapter 3 so that you can get a feel of what it's like to actually be in the book with Joe. So at this point, Joe has been quite literally sucked into the book, and she's about to meet her new side character. A groan startled me awake, but I couldn't distinguish if it was mine or someone else's. My body felt heavy as I laid flat on the ground. My fingers moved from my side to my temple. What had happened? Had I hit my head? I didn't remember falling out of the bed, but it would be just my luck if I had given myself a concussion from being startled by an exploding light bulb. At least I knew my name and my age. That had to mean something, right? I slowly sat up, trying not to worsen the aching pain throbbing in my temples. I couldn't open my eyes against the sheer pain, and they watered as I tried to pry them open. Giving up, I pressed my fingers gently against the inner corner of my eye and tried to recall my last memory before blacking out. Nico had texted me, upsetting me so much I had ended up in my bed with my new book. The book had sucked me in. The whole scenario felt so wildly unrealistic. I felt stupid just thinking about it. There was no plausible way for it to happen. The pain in my temples grew more intense than before. Trying to keep myself calm by pressing a hand to my forehead again, I heard another groan echo. This time, it was much clearer than before. Whoever was the source, they were suffering. I struggled to open my eyes again, wanting to see who it was. Was it Mom? Dad? Were they home already? I pressed my fingers to my tear ducts, wiping away the gathering wetness. Mom? I called out loudly as I managed through my pain. Dad? But the only response I received was the soft chirping of what sounded like birds. Despite the stinging, I forced my eyes open and did not see my bedroom. Woodland scenery surrounded me. The sun was bright in the sky above, illuminating the vivid green leaves on the nearby trees. It was almost as if I'd stepped into a piece of art, or maybe a movie, since I could smell a sweet scent of jasmine carried on a soft breeze. That had to be one of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. Mom, I called out again. It was the only thing I could think to do. None of this was familiar to me. There was no explanation for how I had arrived here. The groan sounded again, and I quickly rose to my feet. They felt wobbly, making it struggle to stay upright. With my new perspective, I spotted a small pond close by. Its reflection glittered under the sun's glow. Hello, I called out, slowly spinning to find the source. Another groan followed, clearly coming from the water. Getting closer, I spotted a strange green lump in the grass near the pond. Tilting my head, I narrowed irritated eyes, trying to figure out what exactly I was looking at. Now, right next to it, I realized the lump was actually a frog lying on its back. Its eyes were wide open and black, and its mouth emitted a groan every time it opened. The rapid rising and falling of its chest looked like it was gasping for air. Oh God, what do I do? I asked out loud, contemplating if I should pick him up. Was I brave enough to put my fingers on his scaly, slimy skin? Taking a deep breath, I slowly knelt beside it. I didn't know the first thing about helping the amphibian with its breathing problem. Hesitantly, I poked a finger at its belly, wondering how it would respond, but the creature didn't move. Did it need water? Or was that a fish thing? Maybe that's why it was so close to the pond? Gritting my teeth, I resisted the urge to grimace as I picked up the frog in my palm. His body was limp and oddly light. Not that I knew how frogs normally weighed to begin with. His heart pounded wildly against my fingertips. I wrinkled my nose at how clammy and bumpy he was, and quickly but carefully eased him into the cool water. I had just hoped it wasn't salt water. That I did remember from biology class. Come on, little guy, I murmured, releasing my hold. He immediately started sinking, too fast for me to grab him before he disappeared from sight into the depths of the pond. With a heavy sigh, I eased back and pressed my wet hand against my forehead. What was I doing? What was I going to do? I was in a place I didn't recognize. Everything that I knew was gone, and I'd apparently just killed a frog. Accidentally, but still. My surroundings were beautiful. The sky was a pleasant shade of blue, and the grass was soft and lush, and the air was warm. It was nearly too perfect. I suppose it could be worse, like a desert without water or at the bottom of a cliff. But how was I going to get home when I didn't even know where I was? As I stared up at the clear sky, the tears I'd done so well at repressing since Nico's messages threatened to fall. Helpless, I didn't know how to combat, swarmed me. Swallowing it down didn't work as well as it usually did, but I had to focus on the problem at hand. I reached for my phone only to find that it wasn't there. My heart sank into my stomach when I realized I was without everything familiar. No phone, no internet, no watch, and no money. Then my stomach twisted with a new fear. What if I was trapped here? A splash startled me from my thoughts, making me turn back to the pond again. The frog now clung to a long piece of grass, sputtering and coughing as it struggled to pull itself from the water. You nearly drowned me, it croaked, speaking in an unexpectedly gentle and masculine voice. There was a touch of a foreign accent there as well, but I couldn't pinpoint the country. And then delayed yeah, there's a lot of words there. And then delayed shock shot through me. I blinked. Had the frog just spoken to me? Maybe I'd hit my head harder than I thought. Because what other explanation was there? Excuse me? I asked, shaking my head. If this was a delusion, maybe playing along would help end it. You nearly drowned me, it repeated, turning his head up to look at me as he pulled himself safely onto the ground. The frog was actually speaking to me. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since its mouth had opened and actually uttered words from it. The frog finally settled and caught its breath, then perched forward among the tall grass. I cringed when it flicked its long pink tongue over its eye. I brushed my fingertip over my forehead, wiping at the sweat that had been formed there. Did you just speak? I asked. If I could understand it, surely it could understand me. Then, more to myself, I added, no, there's no way you could have. I'm seeing things, or is this a dream? There had to be a reasonable explanation, right? And the last one made the most sense since I didn't remember falling off my bed, and I had been through a lot in the past few weeks. A broken engagement and moving back with my parents with no job and crying myself to sleep over countless evenings, a dream had to be the result of my depression and my inability to handle it. But I was a heavy sleeper. Pinching myself might not work. For the sake of trying, I pinched my skin between my forefinger and thumb, hoping it would jolt me from the dream. But I remained in place, surrounded by a forest with a talking frog. One who appeared to be watching me with a twinge of amusement. as if it could actually show emotions on its face. This is just a dream, Joe, I said to myself through gritted teeth as I tugged at my skin harder and squeezed my eyes shut, only to find, yet again, that the pain was real and nothing woke me. This is not a dream, for you are standing before me, the frog, I guess I could call it he, replied in his gentle tenor. I gave up on the pinching, releasing my skin, and stared at him. I would like to know who you are and whence you arrived. Are you from the southern lands? I wrinkled my nose, doing nothing to hide my look of confusion. Whence I arrived? Who spoke like that? What? Surely you must be from the southern lands. Just look at your attire, the frog continued, gesturing a small webbed hand towards me. I slid my gaze down to my white knitted top and jean shorts before meeting his gaze again. His eyes remained transfixed on me, as if I was the one from a foreign country. These are my clothes. Was that really the best I could come up with? As I see, such attire must come from the southern lands, it replied before adding, where the peasants get their clothes from the rag bin. Now this animal was just being offensive. You're a frog, I retorted, as though that should have been enough to refute his insult. For now, he responded, and you are the girl who nearly drowned me. I thought the water would help you, I replied quickly, biting the inside of my cheek. The frog crossed its arms against its chest. It was weird. He not only talked like a human, but acted like one too. As I said, I nearly drowned, and thanks to you, the frog scowled. Well, I'm sorry, I quipped, rolling my eyes. I couldn't believe I was having this conversation with a frog nonetheless. This was going on record as one of the most bizarre dreams I'd ever had in my life. As a child, I'd always dreamed of possessing the ability to speak with animals like nearly every fairy tale princess could, but I never imagined this, a creature of such a small, slimy stature, rudely criticizing my attire. Perhaps we could start with introductions, the frog continued, rising to his feet. My jaw dropped, unable to hide my astonishment at his ability to stand on two legs. Uh, is that your way of agreeing? He asked, or is that your name? Neither. And I'm not giving you my name, I replied, shaking my head. And why not? I looked at him, incredulous. It doesn't really matter, does it? The frog frowned. Have you forgotten it? No, I haven't forgotten it, I snapped, shaking my head. Then perhaps you are running from someone, he remarked. Are you a thief? Is there a bounty on your head? No, I explained. I'm not any of those things. This isn't real. I'm going to wake up in a few minutes and this will all be forgotten. This is only a dream, I said, and my heart was throbbing in my chest. This is not a dream, the frog responded. Has pinching yourself at least twice not already proven that? When I didn't respond, a small smile started forming on his wide lips. It was completely unnatural to see a frog smile. Dream or not, I need to get home, I finally responded as my eyes darted around again, hoping to find something familiar, just a hint of how I'd come here or where I was. May I assume you will always refuse to share with me just where home is for you? I closed my eyes, feeling entirely overwhelmed and fearful. You would be correct, I said, steadying the tremor in my voice. When he didn't argue against my cagness, I opened my eyes again to find him regarding my curiosity. Perhaps I can help you, he said, shrugging carefully, if you agree to help me. This dream was getting ridiculous. A frog was trying to negotiate with me. How on earth do you expect me to help you? I scoffed. You're a frog. A frog prince, to be precise, it explained, still standing on its feet. My eyes widened with surprise. Wait, did you just say prince? Do you struggle to hear properly as well as you dress yourself? He asked, tilting his head curiously. 'Tis no wonder you seem to struggle so. I glared at him and bit down on my lip to prevent myself from arguing. Indeed, it is what I said, but I was not always this way, he explained. But I am both a frog and a prince. The book of fairy tales. The Frog Prince had been among the titles I had recognized, and now I was speaking to a frog prince. Were they the same story? So back to introductions. After all, it is only polite, he tried again, sounding mildly impatient. I released a breath of air as I gave into his request. Joe. My name is Joe. Seems like a rather strange name for a woman. You know, for a prince, you certainly lack manners, I retorted. I did not know peasants required a mannered response, he replied. A peasant? I asked before shaking my head. He had actually called me a peasant? If I'm just a measly peasant to you, then I guess you could find more qualified help somewhere else. I looked around us, finding the woods to be completely void of any other being, just as I presumed. My manservant Henry left nearly a fortnight ago searching for a cure for this curse, but I fear I must take matters into my own hands, as the imbecile has not returned. Good for Henry. Maybe he's not an imbecile. Maybe he had just had enough of the pompous frog, too. Such a large matter for such small hands, I sneered, raising a brow. Prince or no, you're just a frog. Hardly, the frog responded with disdain laced in his voice. I am Prince Arian, James, Arthur, Quinn. One name is enough, I interrupted. A person only needs one name. A prince needs many, he said with a frown. How could a frog frown was beyond me, but the way his lips slanted revealed he was displeased with my commentary. What name do you want me to call you then? Prince Arian. Arian. His name sounded as though it belonged to a character in an epic fantasy novel or something, not a fairy tale for kids. But how were they supposed to pronounce it while just learning to read? It felt even weirder to call a frog by so many names. Right. So now that we have that settled, are you going to tell me how you can help me? And that's where I'm going to end.
That was great. I love it. I love all the banter between them. We're gonna jump into a quick little speed round about your writing. Plotter versus Pantser.
Oh, Pantser.
Yeah. Your favorite writing snack?
Pretzels. I really love pretzels.
Your favorite writing drink?
Like iced coffee. Dunkin' iced coffee.
Your favorite place to write?
My room.
Your favorite time of day to write?
Late night.
And your favorite tropes?
My favorite tropes. Oh my goodness. I'm definitely a fan of like the one bed situation because it's always interesting to see how people navigate that. But I also like the frenemies to lovers or things like that. Yeah.
All right. Can you tell everybody about bingo?
Oh, yeah. So I created a bingo sheet in honor of today's cover reveal. And if you get bingo, then you'll actually be able to receive a free e-arc of Until the Last Page.
So the link for that is in the bio of today's live stream on YouTube. You can go play that. Closes tomorrow, I think. Just double check that with Zara behind the scenes. Are we closing it tomorrow? But while we get an answer for that, yes, we are closing it tomorrow. Let's talk about your pre-orders. Until the Last Page is now available for pre-order. Pre-orders are a huge help for authors, so make sure you go do that. There's a really cool incentive if you pre-order and register your pre-order that Chantal's going to tell you about.
Yeah. So if you register your pre-order, you'll actually receive character stickers. Who doesn't love stickers on the things that we can put them on, our computers, our water bottles? And I actually have a little example that I have of Josephine and her frog. And of course, they're not kissing. They can't stand each other at this point. So who doesn't want to have a little sticker of someone being totally disgusted by their frog prints? And my fantastic friend, Finn Honeycutt, created this artwork for me. And I'm so very grateful for the beautiful artwork. So if you want a piece of this, be sure to pre-order the book. One, who doesn't want some sort of summer read, and also get a sticker out of it too.
Are we going to show the other stickers backstage? Oh, you're muted.
It turns out that the mail had them, the final version. So here's the one that Chantal just showed.
Yeah.
And then we have the other one.
Where they love each other again. Yay.
Yeah. And these are both vinyl, so they are removable. So if you have like decision paralysis with stickers, like I always said growing up. You can put them somewhere, change your mind, and put them somewhere else. I did test them when we did stickers for Down the Wells pre-order incentive, and I tested up until placing it and removing it 8 different times, and then I got bored. So I know it works up until that many times. I can't guarantee it works if you try it a 9th time. Okay, back to scheduled programming.
Right. Well, we've come to the end of our interview. Thank you, Chantal, for being here. I'm so excited for your book to come out. If you are interested in Until the Last Page, make sure you got your pre-orders in. It comes out August 6th of this year, and you're definitely going to fall in love with these characters and this story. So I highly recommend pre-ordering it.
I do.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Okay.